Hey you guys, welcome to the next Chess Bootcamp video. Today I'm going to share with you a really interesting, fun opening that you can play as white. It's something that you can get to play quite a lot of the time, and it's something where I have had some brilliant results. So, it's called the Haxo Gambit, and it derives from the Scotch Gambit, which comes from the Scotch game. So let me walk you through it, and we'll have a look at why you'll get to actually, play this quite a lot of the time at the beginner intermediate level. Okay, so you start with e4. Black responds with e5, very common. Obviously, if they play Sicilian, this isn't going to work. You play knight to f3. So now you are attacking the pawn there on e5, and it's currently undefended. Sometimes you'll see maybe pawn to d6, which is a little bit dull, but the most common response that we will see at lower levels is knight to c6, defending the pawn. Now we go into the Scotch game, so we play d4. So now we've got two pieces attacking the pawn on e5. I think that d6 is not such a great option here, because if you take, say pawn takes, knight takes even, you can take the queen and stuff like that. So you don't tend to see that very often. So far more common than that, as you can see here on the chess.com analysis. Yeah, it says that d6 is only 284 games at top level, and but e takes d4 22,000. It's by far and away the most popular response. Okay, so that's what you're going to see most of the time. And so this is the Scotch game, and they've done the exchange. Now we could take back. We've got the queen and the knight both looking at that pawn, but that's not what we're going to do here. The Scotch Gambit is where you play bishop to c4. It's the second most popular move from this position by white. Now, what do we have going on? We've still got, obviously, the knight and the queen are still looking at the pawn on d4. Okay, and black is very likely to be thinking at this point, okay, well, white could have taken the pawn back, won his pawn back at that point, but instead he's developed a bishop, so now maybe I've got the opportunity to defend my pawn. So, there are not many moves that can do it. I think possibly the best move here is queen to f6, which I have seen on a couple of occasions, but more common than that, bishop to c5. Okay, so now black has these two pieces defending the pawn. Okay, and you're thinking, black's thinking, okay, I'm a bit more secure in the middle, maybe I'll develop my knight, maybe I'll castle kingside, and I've got a game. So now what we do is we gambit another pawn. Okay, we still haven't recaptured our initial pawn, but we play c3. And this leads to some interesting outcomes. So now we've got three pieces attacking the pawn, and black only has two pieces defending it. So what does black do? Black thinks, well, look, this pawn is out on its own. It's already doubled on the d file, so why don't I just go ahead and capture, right? And now this is when black falls into the trap. So what we do, bishop takes f7 with check. Okay, so we've regained one pawn. I mean, it's possible for the king to move, say to f8 or whatever, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but more often than not, you will see the king capture. In fact, it's happened in 19 out of 20 master games. King captures the bishop, and then queen to d5, attacks the king, and there's no way to block. So what's going to happen is this bishop is going to fall, okay, and the king is very much likely to move back to either f8 or to e8. If f8, I've seen both played. Queen captures the pawn, and if now black decides to go ahead and capture, oh no, he's in check, so you know, he would have to block, say, and then you can capture the pawn with a knight. Knight comes flying in, white can castle quite easily, and you're in for a good game. So let me show you the results that I've had with this opening. So from this point, I'll switch over to my games. So chess.com is now telling me the results that I've had. So yeah, from playing c3 in the next move, I'm winning 2 out of 3 of the time, and I've won 3 or 4 out of the alternatives. So, you know, every time I play c3 at this point, then look at this. So that's basically I've won 11 if d takes, which is the most common by far, with 15 out of 19 games, then it's 11-4, right? So it's a pretty good result here for white. So let's just have a look at some of the games that I've played. So let's pick one. Let's pick a couple. Okay, so I'm going to pull up this one, that one, and this one as well. Okay, right, so we'll go back to the beginning. Okay, so let's work through. This is against Faisal Ahmed, 10-10-90 from Bangladesh, I think. Okay, so e4, e5, knight, d4, Scotch game, pawn takes, bishop c4, Scotch Gambit, bishop comes out to defend, and we play c3. Okay, pretty standard. Now the pawn takes, bishop takes, king recaptures, queen d5, as we've seen. In this case, the king went back to e8, queen takes the bishop. So now black is actually 1 pawn ahead, but king has already moved, and king is very exposed. Okay, so in this game, Faisal captures on b2. I recapture with the dark squared bishop, and now this dark squared bishop, as you'll see, is really threatening g7, and if I come in and capture g7, I also get the rook. Okay, so he pushes d6 to try and kick the queen away. Queen comes around to h5 with check. Pawn comes in. I put my queen there on g5, trying to exchange queens, but also you see that because this pawn has moved from g7 to g6, now we have the long dark square diagonal, so that rook is in trouble. Okay, so I go there, he comes in with the knight, I capture the knight with the bishop, and at that point he decides to resign the game. Okay, so that was pretty conclusive. Here's another one. Same opening that we've seen. Bishop comes out to defend the pawn. Okay, this guy's rated almost 1400. I play c3, he captures, in we go. King recaptures, queen with check. Again, this one's back to e8. Again, I don't capture the bishop immediately in this one, so I go over to h5 with check. And actually, at that point, my opponent resigned. And he'd only used 20 seconds of his time. Quite remarkable. So this is a longer game. Manohar R, rated 1323. Bishop comes out, c3 is played, d takes c3, and in this case, it's still Haxo Gambit, but I decide to put my queen over to b3. So obviously the threat here is bishop takes f7 with check. King moves out of the way. I can then carry on and capture the knight if the king doesn't move to f8. So what happens in the game? Pawn captures, which I like. You know, this is familiar territory for me from playing Danish Gambit. I love having these two bishops on these awesome diagonals here. It gives you a lot of control over the board. Okay, let's see how the game progresses. Comes in with check. I block with my knight. Pawn comes into d5, which is pretty pointless because I've actually got 4 pieces addressing that square, although the knight is actually pinned. But I do have 1, 2, and then 3 pieces on there, so it's that was just a bit of a blunder, really. Bishop takes, knight comes out, defending f7, and I decide to capture the knight with check. Pawn recaptures, giving black doubled and isolated pawns on the c-file. The bishop is also now on pre, so I grab the bishop. Light square bishop comes out to a6 in order to, I guess, prevent the king from castling, because it's covering the f1 square and the king can't pass through the f1 square. So I come here, I'm attacking the bishop on a6, I'm also attacking the pawn on c6. Bishop goes to b5, where it can be taken by the knight. Pawn takes, queen takes, check. And black is starting to look very, very far behind. There's no way now that I don't think black is going to be able to castle, because I can simply come in, maybe force an exchange of queens if I want to. I can still castle, and I should be in better shape. Looking at the pawn structure, I've got a 4 and a 1 here, whereas black has a 3 and then 2 singles, which is going to be harder to defend later on in the game. I'm also a full piece up. Okay, so let's see how the game completes. King moves out of the way. Now, he cannot castle, and his h8 rook is playing no part in the game, and he's going to struggle to get that rook out. Okay, so I come in with the queen, centralise the queen, also lining it up with the dark squared bishops, and now the big threat, of course, is queen takes g7 check. He moves the pawn forward, thereby creating some space around the king, weakening the king slightly. I come in with my dark squared bishop with check. King moves up. I move across with check. Also, so I'm attacking here the king and the queen, which is likely to prompt an exchange of queens. Indeed it does. Pawn takes, so now I've got an isolated pawn in the middle of the board, but it's a knight and a bishop against just a knight, and there we go with check. Now I have to move my king. Comes in with a knight, so I'm now going to create a little hidey hole for my king. Rook comes in, king goes to hide. I'm not too concerned about this, so the bishop's coming in there to help defend f2. Rook attacks, rook defends, start to push a pawn, come in, grab a spare pawn. There's really no, I have enough piece superiority at this point that this is a relatively trivial game. So now we've cleared 2 of the rooks off the board. This is better for me. Fight between 3 against 2 is easier than 4 against 3. Not sure about this move. Pushing the pawns up there, this is going to open up the king to a degree. That pawn is now pinned on c7. He comes through. I snatch the pawn anyway, so I'm now 5 points ahead. I've got an extra bishop and 2 extra pawns. He's in check. I come in with a fork. So I know that if the knight takes and my pawn recaptures, I'm weakening the space around my king right now, but that isn't really a concern. My pieces are, all very safe. Rook comes across to attack the bishop, but I'm unconcerned. I'm just going to push ahead with my d pawn. King moves there. I grab another pawn with check. Come back to defend the bishop again. So the pawns are starting to fall like flies here. I get d7 in, and then I get the queen. The d pawn becomes a queen, and my opponent resigns. So very nice little opening trick. I think it works well at blitz. It works well. This was a 30-minute rapid game. So the great thing about it is how often you get this. A lot of players are used to playing e5 in response to e4. Knight f3, knight c6 is very common, and then you can start to surprise them with a d4 push. Very often they'll take, bring the bishop out to c4, and pretty much whatever happens, you'll be assured of some fun, aggressive, attacking games, quite a lot of which end pretty quickly. So that's the Haxo Gambit for you. I hope you enjoy it. I'm very much enjoying playing it myself, and I'll see you in the next video.